Good morning. It's Gary Morris from the DLC group of companies calling from home during this continued COVID-19 crisis. I am so excited to be here today, and we have a huge turnout on this call. And I have a friend of mine joining us today who has just been a icon or a legend in the Canadian real estate space. He has spent 18 years at Brookfield Real Estate Services. You would know the Canadian brand of Royal Lepage, that Mr. Phil Soper is the president and CEO. And they also own a great company in Quebec called Via Capital. And when it comes to Canadian real estate, there's nobody, in my opinion, that knows the market and studies the trends, closer than Phil. So, Phil, good morning, welcome, and thank you for making the time.
Oh, Gary, a real pleasure. When you reached out, I leapt at the opportunity. You reached so many people with your communications. And I think what you're doing for the industry overall and the extended industry beyond real estate, secured financing into real estate itself, it's a wonderful thing. So thank you to you, your leadership team, DLC overall, for what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate those comments. It's funny because more than any other time that I can remember, people are dying for information, and they're really trying to get it right, and they want to make sure that as they've had a little bit more time, they've slowed down, that they really plan to prepare for coming out of the other side of this COVID-19. And one of the things that continues to drive the Canadian economy, obviously, is Canadian housing. So maybe we'll start there. I mean, with the COVID-19 world and the situation that we've been experiencing over the last little while, how are you guys doing overall as a company, and how are you settling in? Has it been real trying times for you, or?
You know what? What is that? The end of week 7 appear sort of close to most of us being under house arrest, and it's we're getting used to it. It's shocking. I know you and I have talked about this before. You working awful hard,
Right.
putting a lot of hours, but really productive. You get a lot of interfacing in, if you want to put it that way, a lot of meetings. You see a lot of people, you talk to a lot of people, and you feel like you're making a difference. So leadership is about making a difference. I don't think too many people get into leadership really for the money or the prestige. Right. They typically, the ones who succeed, get into it because they want to make a difference. And these days you feel like you're making a difference because obviously there's a lot of people looking for support, a lot of people looking for insight. We don't have crystal balls, and yet we have perspectives that are probably broader, at a higher level. And maybe we can put some things in context that help people and help by extension their families, because they can get off the calls and say, you know what, I think things are going to be okay.
It's interesting. I kind of feel like I'm a teenager again. I mean, somebody's telling me that I can't go to the bar, can't have a drink anymore, right? And I'm grounded. I'm stuck at home here, right? So it feels like I'm back to 15 or 16 years old. I can't get out and I can't have a drink. And
well, so, I like your office, though. That'd be a good place to have a scotch.
Yeah, it is a good place, actually. So maybe we'll start with, and there's all different markets and provinces and segments of the real estate industry that I'd like to talk to you about today. But maybe I'll just start. Can you just give us a 360 perspective, just looking down on the Canadian market overall, and talk us through sort of what you're seeing? And also, some of those numbers in those bigger markets like Vancouver and Toronto.
This will be, if we look macroeconomically at the overall Canadian economy and the world economy, let's focus on Canada. It will be the most incredible slowdown in economic activity in history. The Great Depression of almost 100 years ago now, wars, other pandemics, if you go way back to the Spanish flu a century ago, nothing has slowed an economy the way this one is, because we're compliant. We're doing what is necessary to protect our communities, our families, our parents, our grandparents. We're good citizens, and most people in the world are good citizens. And our public health officials have said this is what you need to do to, in the long run, keep your community safe. And maybe if you'll, for maybe one quick little segue, the early economic results. The early economic results from other parts of the world show that cities and countries that do what we're doing, the mandated stay at home, the slowing down of an economy, social distancing, that do it well, are the ones that have the fastest bounce back in their economy. So there's some, including some in our industry, who believe that we should roar ahead and move quickly. That has proven to be really challenging for economies elsewhere in the world, because what can happen is you get a rebound of the virus, and then you can't overwhelm hospitals, and then consumer confidence really collapses. What we're really looking for here is a way to keep Canadians understanding that this is a weeks and months issue, that this too shall pass. This is not a recession like the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and the way it impacted the American financial system and real estate industry. That lasted 6 years. So this is not a years-long economic collapse. This is a health crisis. It's like a car accident, as opposed to the long, drawn-out health effects of, say, not looking after yourself and having heart problems or something that's going to last, and it's going to take a really long time to get yourself back into shape. This is, we got to walk away, we've got to clean up the mess, and we should be back into business. Now, the longer it lasts, the more permanent damage there is. But overall, if we look at the Canadian industry right now, there are parts of it in that when we report the month of April, there will be parts that were down 80%. And typically it's the biggest cities.
Yeah.
But, this last week, close to you, I had a meeting in Kelowna yesterday. Notice I said in Kelowna. I was actually in Kelowna. But and Kelowna is almost at 50%.
50% of what they were in transaction volume, or
in volume, in transactional volume, the value of homes sold, which is really amazing. That's well beyond what we would have thought in April. That's more like a best case number for June or even July. So it's impacting the most densely populated, the biggest cities. It's impacting volumes more than it is in our secondary cities, our medium-sized cities. It's impacting luxury homes more than it's impacting medium value or entry-level homes. It's impacting recreational property more than it's impacting properties associated with housing need. So, but it's still too soon to really understand the true impact, because most of us, including those in the mortgage industry and in the brokerage industry, are doing exactly what we're told to do. We're staying at home. We're servicing clients who have an urgent need for housing, but we're not out selling yet. And I know you've got some good language around the difference between servicing and selling in this world.
Yeah, well, and thank you. It's interesting because I'm like you, speaking to a lot of people and a lot of realtors and markets, and to your sentiments. I mean, there's still activity out there. People are still moving, and those buyers that are out there that are engaging are serious buyers. And I would have thought, it would have been a little more severe than certainly we're seeing. It's early days here. You talk about the hardest hit markets, and anytime market is hardest hit, for an investor or for me or for someone who wants to purchase property, it's often the contrarian theory where it's the biggest opportunity. So the hardest hit markets, like any previous sort of recession, usually, as you said, luxury markets, recreation properties. Overall, where do you think, if you're out there today and you're looking to invest in real estate, where do you think the greatest drops are offering the greatest opportunities.
I think you need to come, if for the investor specifically who's looking to become a landlord, for example, not a flipper. This would be a really bad time to be a flipper.
Right.
There's risk and there's stupidity. But
Yeah.
if you're an investor, I think there is going to be opportunities in our condominium markets in our big cities. Because you need to step back and you got to say, what's the fundamental demand? What's the fundamental drivers of demand for housing? And they tend to be household formation and things like interest rates and home prices and the terms and conditions that you can offer and as you help and service Canadians in their financing. Those are all good and they're all supporting. But if you don't have more people looking for housing, you're not going to see the kind of numbers we've seen over the last almost 20 years. It's been a great run in Canada, right. And that hasn't stopped. I like to paint a picture that makes it really sort of hit home for people. And I've got 4 kids. They're all millennials.
Yeah.
2 are graduated university, 2 are still in university. And a lot of baby boomers like I am are in exactly the same place I am. And we were one household. Now we're a big household, but we're one household. And it won't be long, fingers crossed, till we have created 5 households. So all 4 of the kids, 2 have left, 2 more will leave when they graduate, and all 4 have serious boyfriends. They've got all girls.
Yeah.
And that is creating a lot of demand for housing. One family turns into 5. Sounds like the Sopers are a little bit like the virus, doesn't it?
They're spreading quickly.
Yeah, and then there's also immigration.
Yeah.
So you have this combination, and a more minor addition to household formation is this wave of baby boomers. We have 5,000 baby boomers retiring a week, and my guess is this pandemic will probably accelerate that number a little bit because some people who are close to retirement will decide to retire. Some people will be asked to retire as their companies get back and rolling. And some of those people won't just be trading. They won't be just selling a house and buying a house. Some of them will do the old 2-for-1, where they'll buy call a property close to their home or their city or their kids, and they'll buy a recreational property. And you know what? That'll create a lot of demand for housing. So if you step back and look at the fundamental demand drivers, I think you'd say the best opportunities remain in the places that have had the fastest growth. Now you got to worry about price, and this is where individual investors become, they're either Jedi masters or they stumble. Right. But you can find the local, if you're into this, you'll find the local deals. But places like the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, the greater Vancouver area, and Montreal, greater Montreal, have provided incredible returns for real estate investors for some time. Montreal is the latest party to that party. Latest city to that party, but it's had a great run, and that shouldn't stop. And then there's the people who have the bigger risk. I'm from Calgary originally, mm-hmm. and I've done some investing at the residential real estate level with friends. A friend in particular who's in my business locally, and you just have to be really careful in a place like Calgary because you can get caught in an extended downturn. So someone wants to make an investment in Alberta right now. It's, you just have to have a higher risk tolerance. I'll tell you, even in Alberta, home prices are pretty stable. You look at over 5 years of what this oil crisis, energy crisis has lasted. It really started in the fourth quarter of 2014. Calgary prices have only lost 10%. 10% over 5 years, that's 2% a year, considering everything they've gone through.
Wow, really?
Oil is basically down to zero. And we could get into why that is, but the fundamental reason is demand is here and supply is here. We have a housing shortage in Canada, and I tell you, we're not we didn't go build a whole bunch of houses during the damn pandemic. We're going to come out of this and we're still going to have a housing shortage.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you look at Calgary, you look at Alberta in general, and I mean, it's been the perfect trifecta, right? You got the COVID-19, you got the oil crisis, you got escalated unemployment rate, everything that you got, the floods now, after the fires. I mean, it's just. I
Heart
mean,
goes out to our friends in Fort Mac.
Yeah, they sure do, and I'm just. I look at, we have a fairly strong market in Alberta, and our guys continue to do amazing things. The numbers continue to be great. And we take our hats off to them, because it has been for several years now, the most challenging market in the country. So we can use Calgary as sort of an example to sort of dovetail into my next question. So if you look at office space right now, so you and I are on Zoom, and as we were talking offline, I don't feel any more disconnected looking at you from my office here if I were sitting in your office and we were face to face. And there's a lot of people, whether it be Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, that are either traveling in, have a condo in the city to go to work, they're going back and forth. I think we're quickly learning that there's a huge opportunity for a lot of these companies to limit travel and still be very effective in what they do. The reluctancy to use digital conferencing and do things like this has completely changed because we've been forced to change. How do you think that's going to affect the vacancy rate in office towers in those large cities? I mean, I have to think that it's not going to be immediate, but I have to think that there's going to be a trend for companies requiring a lot less space. Would you agree or disagree?
I think you're probably right. The good news for everywhere, but in particular, I'd say Calgary, not even Alberta, because the problem wasn't nearly as bad in Edmonton. We had an excess of downtown Class A office space in Calgary, including, my company, Brookfield's Brookfield Place project, which is the largest commercial office tower in Western Canada, came on at a bad time. We certainly didn't know that the oil prices would drop 70% at the end of 2014. So there's too much capacity. But if you look at Toronto, where I live, for example, we've got this massive amount of young people, particularly living in downtown Toronto, because the lifestyle is awesome. And there's not enough office capacity in downtown Toronto to give them jobs. So they're actually reverse commuting, the equivalent in the Lower Mainland of heading to Burnaby or heading to Tri-Cities, heading out of downtown where they live, because that's where they could get work, because companies can't. And so office towers are going up to capture the capacity. And the good news for the commercial real estate industry, I'll use our company as an example. We were running out of space. We've been growing just like you, and we're in a good building right on the new crosstown subway in Toronto, lovely park area. We just didn't want to. We didn't want to move. We did the investigation. We owned the building, and we looked around and we said, doesn't make sense to move at least for a decade. So we said, how are we going to accommodate everybody? So we went totally open concept. I remember when I first took the job, I had this big wraparound office with a shower and a bathroom.
Yeah.
And that left pretty soon in my tenure because I needed the space and became, and then I cut off a corner of it. So they chunk, and it was getting smaller. Well, now I'm in a cubicle. Yeah. So and it's pretty cool. It's modern, right? It's brand new, it's clean, it's shiny, but this whole floor plate of people, and there's buzz. So we did the right thing. We have lots of little meeting rooms and things. People are pining for the ability to get back in there and work. It's pretty efficient space. It's not a lot of space, pretty efficient. We've got good tools for collaboration and that sort of thing. So, and I've got a lot of young staff, as I know you do. They've got little kids at home. It's not that great You know,
Right.
I hear from some of my frontline realtors, yeah, call it young millennials who they and their partner are in a 500 square foot condo, both living from working from home.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of space.
That'll be impossible long term.
And they can't go to Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
So now, so this is a little unusual, but I think your point is well made. There will be a stepped curve here, and the time of the big palatial spaces. I've been in business long enough to think back to the time that the square footage of your office reflected your status within a corporation.
Sure. Yeah.
And it wasn't about what you needed to get done or your job. It's just every time you went up, you got more square footage. And that's changed. We've really, if you look at the Adelaide Place, which is another Brookfield building that headquarters Deloitte in Canada. Deloitte moved to full, I'm not a big fan of this model, but they moved to full virtual, where you don't even have a dedicated space. Even the partners, when they come in, they got to go hunt for a space. And so the idea is they're supposed to be out with clients, supposed to be working from home, and they were able to fit into much less footprint than their large company. And of course, downtown office space, very expensive. I don't know if it's really the optimum way, but maybe after this, you're bang on, and they'll say, I'm not going to go downtown and fight for a cubicle. I'm going to work here. And maybe it'll drive more residential transactions as people look to, I know a bunch of people who have, messaged me and said to me, Phil, my house isn't big enough. I said, I thought you were shedding kids. They go, I know, but I need more space for my spouse.
She's driving me crazy. I'm too close to her over these last 6 weeks. We need a bigger house if we're going to stay together. Yeah. It's thanks for that answer. Very, very insightful. It's interesting because to your point, those with young families in condos, it's going to be very difficult to work from home because there is just, so much distraction, that comes with that. But to those who are a few years older and the kids are a little bit older, I think there's going to be in my opinion anyway, a fairly large movement to work from home. It's funny. One of the things, if I was speaking to any realtor or any mortgage professional on the phone today, I would just say that the reluctancy to use Zoom and this digital conferencing has, as we said, largely dissipated. And, so many times when we just have a short conversation need with one of our clients, we pick up and have an audio call, right? Or we have them come into the office. I think where you got to change now is I'm going to send links and have one of these calls. And when it comes to closing transactions and negotiating changes and that, there is no substitute for me looking at you face to face. You're not distracted. An audio call, you're distracted and I can't see what you're doing. And you might be doing, some other messaging or emailing or something else around the home. So I think that there's going to be a big movement. A recent study that I just read, and the most recent one that's come out, companies are already saying they're experiencing a 10 to 15% increase in productivity from the vast majority of those going home. And it's because, they haven't got the water cooler and the coffee conversations in the morning and their head down. But the other thing is they have a little more flexibility to do some other stuff during the day. So they're sitting at their desk in the evening and just pounding through work rather than watching America's Got Talent or The Voice or something. Because most people, as you said at the start of the call, they're good. I mean, they're people are good, by nature.
Yeah, and absolutely.
And if you give them a little bit of flexibility and you give them the opportunity to work from home, I know we are going to reconsider our entire philosophy on it at our company, number one. And the second thing, I think a lot of our travel budget is going to go down. And I always say to our mortgage brokers and realtors, the more convenience you can provide the customer, the better you're going to be, right, at your job, because we are all convenience driven.
Yep. So I got a question for you on that one. We would often have someone dial into a meeting, and we've got video conferencing capabilities. So say our Vancouver, the regional manager, rather than have him fly all the way to Toronto, he'd just dial in. But everybody else would sit around a table. And the person that was doing what we're doing today kind of gets lost. I wonder if it will lead to more virtual meetings, even though people are on, call it in the same location, because that way everybody's got kind of an equal opportunity to
Hmm.
participate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will. I mean, I just, I just can't, think for a second that it's not going to radically change. I mean, as I said, I just know it firsthand. I've had, it's been so cool to have all my calls now on Zoom rather than audio. And when everyone can look and I can see, 8 of us or 12 of us on one screen, I could see us doing it as, inside of some of our offices, or some guys are going to the boardroom. Some guys will stay in their office, at their desk. I mean, I think it's going to be a big movement. And I think it's going to be a big movement around real estate and around mortgages. I mean, like, people, just imagine if I can save 45 minutes from getting in my car, driving somewhere, fighting traffic, the distractions, the cost, finding parking, for a 30-minute call that is, just to go over the closing of the transaction or something. That actually leads me maybe to the next discussion. So I believe that it's going to, I mean, I said on one of my last calls that, something as simple as e-signatures that, the FIs, the financial institutions, have been trying to get deployed for 5 years. All of a sudden, every bank in the country got them deployed in 14 days. We're talking virtual tours now, and that's by need. Of course, when I'm going to go look for a home, I want to walk through it. But in the absence of the ability to do that, there's these convenient softwares. The appraisals, the need for, lawyers and notaries like we once did. There's such a massive technology awakening now. How do you think that is going to affect the real estate transaction? Is it not at all, to some degree? Like, where do you think that we should position ourselves to be ready for it?
The wave was, just a second. Sorry about that, Gary.
Gotcha. All good.
Unplug myself. The wave of technological change, of course, was upon us before this. The amount of money that had been invested in prop tech, the property-related technology over the last 5 years, quite amazing. It's just starting to slow down in 2019 a bit. The rate of growth was flattening a bit, but the amount of money that had been pushed into the industry, the number of new ideas, particularly south of the border, and new approaches had pushed a lot of potential change on the industry. But there was grudging acceptance of some of it, the old resistance to change. And why should we change what we've always done when it seems to work and I'm busy? Well, of course, this has brought it on. Like, if I look just on rowlepage.ca, so realtor.ca is the most busy real estate listing site in the country, and rowlepage.ca is the most busy real estate company website in the country. If I go back 4 weeks ago, or maybe 5 weeks ago, when we first started the total lockdown and had introduced virtual open houses, we had 10 nationally. On this weekend, we had 1,000. So
wow.
It is, I mean, if we had tried to push this out like you do, you introduce new technology, you've got a team that's right across the country, you tell them the features, the functions, the benefit of the new technology, you put splashy events on, you put encouragements, maybe you have contests, you do everything. And there's this sort of
so true,
adoption of unless you put a whole bunch of money, you say you don't get paid unless you use this technology. That always works. But suddenly, boom, people they learn overnight. So I think there has been a step up, and it will help the industry. I think what will not change, because we've looked at it, we've experimented with it with some financial institution partners and things, people still want to deal with an advisor, a human being. It may be this way, it may be through audio only, or it may be face-to-face. And we are talking about a unique acquisition, principally a piece of real estate. and people want to see the real estate, even in the pandemic, where we've gone to great lengths to do things remotely. One of the things I said really, really on, and I had a spirited discussion with the CEO of the Ontario Real Estate Association about this, because we were in the beginning, of course, the main thing we're worried about were people's health and safety going back to the middle of March. And I said, Tim, it's not reasonable to expect a family to make the largest investment purchase of their family's life without stepping foot on that
Sure.
property. They're going to have to visit the property. So we need to find a way for them to do that safely, because people need housing. We can't just shut down housing for 2 months. It's impossible. And that's exactly what it's turned out. People have continued to visit properties. They visit them less. They use tools to understand them. Virtual open houses are great. I think we'll see more of them. Although, as a number of people have pushed back me and said, I sometimes go to houses for recreation, creating ideas, and
Right.
I end up buying houses that I didn't want to. But I go there because it's fun. It's social. It's inspiring, and so that's not going to change. And the fact that we're not going to have open houses with people wandering around without a realtor inside the house. That's not going to happen.
For sure.
Safety and security, but also, you want to interact. You want to have an opportunity to talk to someone in a random way. So I think the technology will drive changes. The big change, and we're rolling out a new platform. It's called RLP Sphere in May. That I've been jokingly, and my marketing people hate it, but I've been calling the pandemic platform. It wasn't designed for this, because it was the high level design was done 14 months ago, and it's been in development. It's a cloud-based, AI-driven end-to-end platform. And the big thing we're trying to accomplish is the integration of all the little islands of technology that exist in real estate brokerage, including the interfaces to mortgage professionals, the legal community, and things. So, and that'll, as we roll out other iterations of RLP Sphere, that'll happen. But there are other companies across North America who had the same vision, that the solutions are there, the tools are there. How do we get people to adopt them? And what are we really trying to do? And I think what we're trying to do is, as you mentioned, improve productivity, reduce cycle time, the amount of time in total that a mortgage professional or a real estate broker has to spend on a transaction, to reduce errors, and to do a better increase client satisfaction. So if you do all those things by integration and leveraging technology, you don't have to worry about the role of the advisor. The advisors frees up time that they're spending on administration.
Right.
Can spend time face to face with a client.
Yeah, it's interesting. For those who don't embrace technology around, the financial service industry or the real estate industry, is going to be in big trouble, and it's going to be death by 1,000 paper cuts. They're going to wake up one day and they're going to say, I'm not relevant, and all of these, people have passed me by. And a prime example of that is if you look at when Amazon came on. I mean, Walmart was the largest corporation, one of the largest retail corporation in the world. It was a Goliath. It had changed every mom and pop small town in North America, because you had all the products in one area. It was just a behemoth, and they didn't take Amazon seriously enough. And if you look today, and Amazon is a much younger company, it is 4 times the market cap of Walmart, the largest retail corporation in the world. It is the 4 times. It's a $1.2 trillion market cap. Why? Because they made it convenient. I ordered stuff last night, 1 click. So if you're on this call right now and you don't know the technology and you're not using it, like mobile app, we built this really industry-leading mobile app that every one of our agents has it, and everyone should be using it. Not all are. It just makes the interaction, the ability to qualify and to get pre-approvals and to look at rates. So I agree with you 100%. There is no eradication of the realtor or the mortgage professional, because we need that human interaction. We want to be able to, speak to somebody. We're conservative by nature, but there is a very fast movement to, as little involvement, as much as I can do up front, collecting documentation, communicating back and forth, virtual tours, to look at the property first before I get in the car and visit 20 of them. I'm going to do a virtual tour, but I'm still going to go and step foot in. And the lesson here for all of us, like we've seen in the last 5 weeks, is understand the technology that's out there readily available, right? And don't be afraid of it. Run towards it, not run away from it. And I think you're going to find that you're going to have more time. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to communicate, much more broadly, and your business is going to grow. So, I mean, there's changes coming, but I think they're all positive. And I think that, I honestly believe that our next 5 years are going to be, excellent years ahead of us. There's a lot of positives that are coming out of this. And to your comments, Phil, I think that largely Canada has done a very good job, and I think we are going to rebound faster than so many other areas. If you talk about the real estate itself, and one thing we haven't touched on right now, and this will be, I'm going to ask you, short-lived probably, but inventory levels. Inventory levels have been very low in most markets in Canada. How low have they been? I mean, are they at historic levels of low or not? And when do we think that we'll start seeing inventory levels start to creep back in? Obviously, it's going to be tied to, the rollout of the reintroduction back to work. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I believe the shortage of inventory or a housing supply crisis has been probably the number two biggest social challenge we've had as a nation over much of the last decade. You can tell by every election, whether it's federal or provincial, in most parts of the country, it is front and center in the debates. So it's healthcare, and I'd say housing and education and the environment. So I'd put housing in the number 2 spot because we don't have enough for people to purchase. We don't have enough quality housing. We're not, and there's lots of issues in housing. We're not dense enough. The densest city in Canada is Vancouver, the Lower Mainland. And it is something like 1/4 as dense as a beautiful European city like Barcelona, which you would never dream is a really dense city. They don't have the skyscrapers we do. You've been there, right? It's pretty. You don't get green and parks, and so we need to find a way to quit sprawling. We need more houses in the available land we have for the resources we have as a government and the environment. So that's part of housing policy. The other part is affordability, and we know this is something that particularly governments like the current government of BC have tried to fix by hammering demand, but hammering demand doesn't change the fact that those kids are leaving home and they need to put a roof over their head. You can delay that. You can say, bang, 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 and make it really hard to buy a house. But all that does is create a backlog. And when they save up the money, like they did with the stress test, it just creates a wave. And then you get spikes in home prices and brings out unsavory characters, right? The home flippers and all the bad things. So it's bad for society. You want to try to keep pace with household formation. So back to the pandemic. Coming into March 2020, if you look at February 2020 numbers, 45% year over year increase in volume in Vancouver, 45%, 46% in Toronto, 21% in Calgary. These are increases, year over year increases, not in prices, in the number of properties trading hands. Ottawa, Montreal, it was the first time I'd seen in almost a decade where everything was pulling forward. We were headed for some really uncomfortably high home price increases in our major markets like Vancouver. And I'm going, oh boy, here we go again, 2016 again. And then you get the heavy fist of government, and it creates the problems we just said. So that has not disappeared. As we talked about earlier, we haven't built any other houses. In fact, if you look under the covers of the pandemic right now, we've got a seller's market in a pandemic. People kind of think, oh, there's an economic crisis on. You must be able to go out and buy one of those
Feel it, yeah.
multi-million-dollar shacks in West Van for half price. when in fact, that is not happening. We've got way more buyers in market today in this dramatically
depressed market.
Volume is sunk, but it's still way out of whack with the number of buyers here and the number of sellers here. And the challenge is, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's a little theory of mine, and it relates to what we saw in 2009. And this is the BYOB house party theory. It's highly scientific. So this is the way it works. Okay. At a party, you're holding a party, and you ask everybody to bring a bottle of wine, bring some beer, bring what you want for the party. But you get some young folks, and I'll pick on young folks, and they come and they don't bring anything to the party. Well, suddenly the value of the beer and wine you have goes up because it becomes more scarce. In 2009, in the wake of the global financial crisis, the Great Recession, the first people back in the market were the first-time buyers in Canada. Didn't work that way in the U.S. because they couldn't get a mortgage.
Right.
In Canada, home prices hung on. They did a little bit of a dip, and they were down in the first quarter of 2009. But the first-time home buyer, they came to the party, and they didn't bring anything. They didn't bring a bottle of wine.
Right.
Typically, your move-up buyer, they come, they bring a house, and they buy a house.
Right.
And it keeps things kind of even. But if you've got 40% of the transactions in 2020 on a go-forward basis being first-time home buyers, they're coming to the party, and they're not bringing anything.
Right.
And so I think we're going to be over-skewed on the demand side. And there's other subtleties. There's more thought that goes into it than just BYOB. The fact is, the older you are, the more the demand the disease, COVID-19, impacts people. So the risk is higher. Anyone can get the disease. Anyone can die from the disease. But 79% of the deaths in Canada to date have been in long-term
care facilities,
care homes, which is so terribly sad, but it does say there's a continuance there. And of course, ownership of homes skews older than buyers of homes. Listers skew older. And so they're going to be a little more reluctant to allow people into their home to look at their home, and they can't be there. So they're going to wonder if those people are taking care or if they're spreading germs or the virus in their home, and they're going to be reluctant. So I think our big challenge in the weeks ahead is going to be convincing the Canadian home seller in particular that this is one of the safest areas of business, one of the safest things in the post-COVID-19 lockdown era. As things open up, when restaurants open, I saw in Italy, they're starting to put very clever pieces of plexiglass in between diners in restaurants. So people will be able to go to restaurants. They won't be as dense. There'll be some protection, but it'll still feel that's the supermarket, a trip to the doctor's office, a trip to a restaurant won't feel as safe as selling or buying a house. And I think that's one of the things that we as an industry have to get that message across, that when it's safe to do so, we are going to be one of the safest and most important engines of economic recovery in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Well put. What a wonderful perspective. It's interesting because you start to feel already, the feeling this week over last week, and the anticipation of the reintroduction of the economy, and just the things we're seeing out of some of the U.S. states and some of the other countries where the pent-up demand, restaurants are lined up around the corner. There's massive pent-up demand, and I think you're going to see that in Canadian real estate as well. The one thing that will be very interesting to watch is hundreds of thousands of international buyers every year come to our markets, and in particular Vancouver and Toronto. And I think that's going to be much slower. And that has had immense pressure on some of the increase in prices in our larger cities. Do you expect the international buyers to to be slower to come back, or do you expect that as soon as they feel safe and travel restrictions are lifted, we're going to see that? Because those immigrant families that are immigrating to Canada, they're a massive part and a very important part of our country and our economy.
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point. We released a study last year on we called them newcomers. So these were immigrants that have been in the country 7 years and less. And if you've been here 7 years, you actually have a higher percentage of home ownership than people who were born in Canada, 72.3 or something like that.
Wow.
And the overall Canadian home ownership rate, including them, is 69. So in certain parts, especially the less populated parts of the country, it's kind of counterintuitive. Places like Saskatchewan, up to 45% of the transactions can be newcomers. So these aren't immigrants that arrive immediately they arrive and they buy, although about 30% do. They come with the cash to buy a home, and about 30% do. But most of them, it's a little bit delayed. But by the time they get to 7 years, they own more homes. More of them own homes than
Canadians as a percent. Yeah.
But it's really, really, really important part of the industry, and it's complex. It's complex to understand what international migration patterns are going, what this disease will do to international buying patterns. We know, for example, south of the border, their brand as an attractive place for the best and brightest, the smartest, the most skilled, the people with the capital around the world. The brand of America has fallen relative to Canada. If you look at the economists, the economic research institute out of the UK, we have 3 cities in the top 10 most livable cities in the world list. Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, and Montreal and Ottawa, and it doesn't go any lower than that. So there's only 5 Canadian cities, are all in the top 25. Well, you have to go way down the list. Number 21 is the only American city in the top quartile, and it's Honolulu, way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, desperately trying to get away from America. So why am I raising this, other than it's fun to pick on America? Well,
and easy sometimes.
And easy. Immigration has been shut down altogether, but Trump was well on the way to curtail it. And they had a labor shortage, just like Canada did. Lowest unemployment rate in a generation. Nobody working for either of our companies has ever, coming into this crisis, the health crisis, had never lived at a time where unemployment was as low as it was in February of 2020. And yet he had lowered his immigration rate, banning countries, lowering immigration to the point where it was less than 3 times bigger than Canada. And for those of you who are into numbers, you'd know that America is more than 10 times bigger than Canada in population. So you go back just a few years, like 4 or 5 years, America would invite new Americans at a rate about 10 times Canada. And now it's down to 2.8 or something, and now it's even sunk lower. So what does this really mean? Well, one of the things it means is, in this competitive world where you're not just competing for oil or I don't know, an Amazon headquarters, you're competing for skills, for people, for skills. Our brand is growing, and our biggest competitor for skills on the global scale is falling and shooting themselves in the foot again and again. Now, my guess is that'll probably get fixed, and the pendulum will swing. But the Democrats in the U.S. haven't typically been a big pro-immigration party. It's typically been the Republicans, because they're pro-government. So, you assume that there's a switch in government, and perhaps they go 8 years, and we could have another decade of being the preferred destination in the Western Hemisphere for the best and brightest around the world. And the opportunities for the nation in terms of productivity and innovation, and it is stunning. So now what will happen in the short term? There'll be a blip. In the medium term, call it maybe middle of next year, maybe end of next year, when things are back to normal, I think we're going to come out of this. Certainly, if you look at the way Canada, the way you mentioned it earlier, Gary, the way our provincial leaders have worked with the Prime Minister, the way our leaders right across the country have stepped back and taken advice like Dr. Bonnie, they let our public health officials that were experts step to the front, and our political leaders have stepped back. It's been textbook. Now we've stumbled. We could have done things better. We could have done things earlier, but compared to the countries that have really had problems, Canada's brand's going to rise. So is Australia's, so is New Zealand's. And, for the Western Hemisphere, which is billions, I don't know how many people in North and South and Central America, but it's a big chunk of the world. This is going to be the place they want to live if they want to live in the Western world. In fact, using another global ranking, the Wharton Business School's best countries list, we're either not at number one or number two. Typically, we're number one in livability, number two overall. Switzerland beat us out in 2019. Sneaky Swiss, but they're kind of like a boutique.
Yeah. Well, wow. I mean, just some fascinating information there. Thank you for sharing that. Incredibly interesting. I want to, I'm looking at sort of the time, and we'll try to wrap this up in the next 10 or 12 minutes. And I got, a few other things that I spoke with Chilton a couple of weeks ago on,
great guy.
I know you're a friend of David's as well. He's just one of the most relatable, down to earth individuals on the planet. He's
and funny.
Yeah. Oh, hilarious. I can't say enough about David, but we talked about Airbnb and we talked about VRBO, and, there's a lot of people who have financed these condos and they've been supporting them obviously with the short-term rental market. And of course, the short-term rental market has been radically impacted and probably still will be for, to some degree for the balance of this year. And who knows what 2021 looks like. Because of that, the longer this goes, obviously there's going to be some real compression on those units. People either have to go to long-term rentals or they have to, start to sell them in order to, get them out of that financial situation they may find themselves in. What are your thoughts on the effect of that, Airbnb in particular? And do you think when you couple that with, some of the larger cities and the condo prices that you spoke of that might be the most exposed, do you think we're going to see some real opportunities? And do you think that's where we're going to see the deepest price discounts?
I think you're bang on. As I look across the entire housing stock, it stands out to me to be the biggest opportunity because, yes, it will come back. Mortgage deferral is a huge part of the defense of the economy that the federal government and our major financial institutions have put in place. That's huge. If you can keep people from defaulting on the mortgages, you don't put a black mark on their ability to borrow. That's what happened in America in 2008 and 9. People took years to be able to be, even a couple of engineers, completely working. They couldn't get a mortgage, right? So if we can avoid that, we save housing overall. We save the whole housing. It's hugely important. The other things that are being done to help tide people over should give the investor in a short-term rental service like Airbnb some hope, but a lot of them are I don't think they're going to be able to carry the properties because they really, how investing works in expensive markets and big cities. You push it pretty close to the wall in terms of how much you borrow and your projected cash flows. You don't plan for months of empty. Months of empty is just not in your business case, not in your worst case, right, scenario.
Yeah.
So I believe you're right. Bang on. There will be short-term opportunities. Now, I think the biggest opportunities in the short term will happen in our biggest cities where the rental vacancy rate was the lowest. Can't remember exactly what Vancouver is, but I think it's 0.7 of 1%.
Very low, you're right.
Yeah. And Toronto's the same. Montreal's the same. So some of that will be easily sold to people looking to buy their first home, and those first-time home buyers I told you about. So I don't think we're looking at a major plummet in prices just because of that shortage of housing and the demands there.
No.
But what it was, is it SoftBank? No, they were WeWork. I'm not sure Airbnb who the biggest investors were, but what a tough business. Travel and tourism, hotels, airlines. We in real estate and the
Finance
industry, finance, it's been tough. But compared to some of the other industries, we are blessed. So
yeah, we sure are. Couldn't agree more. So I mean, it's interesting because I look at just listening to you today, and the question you get is around opportunities, and obviously, I think big box retail commercial is going to be under immense pressure. We talk about Amazon and the drive. And now, I mean, everyone, has learned how to use Amazon in the last 30 days by need. So their numbers in stock continue to rise. You realize how easy and simple it is. So, there's still going to be obviously a need for, collection of people, shopping malls and that sort of stuff. But the big box, large retailers and that space, I think, is going to soften. I mean, it's just, I think the industrial real estate, the storage market in particular is going to be on short supply and is going to actually increase. I think it's the retail segment that is the most affected. Would you agree with that on the big box?
I think you're bang on. Now, our company through another division is the second largest mall owner in the United States through a subsidiary called General Growth. So they own upscale malls, some of the best malls in America. Yeah. But the main reason, because Brookfield's a property investor, it's one of the key pillars, property ownership and development. But the main reason they invested was not for retail rents; it was for the quality of the underlying real property. So the locations of these beautiful malls in our big cities tend to be awesome places for residential housing, for professional buildings, office towers, for entertainment. And people aren't going to start, I'm dying to go out to a restaurant.
So am I.
I'm not used to
big bottle of wine and a nice steak with a nice couple.
I love eating home alone with my wife and my kid, but I really want to get out and that is the recreation I think all of us are dying to see again. So I think there'll be some repurposing, but retail itself is obviously going to feel some pressure. And for all the people who just got into Amazon, it usually doesn't take so long to get shit. I mean,
I know. Yeah.
I've been a big Amazon guy. Right. I'm used to that 24-hour, 48-hour delivery. Wait till they try that. I mean, it's really addictive.
Yeah, 100%. I know on this call, I know I got a message from Ron Pfeiffer yesterday and Ron Rouse and Darren, from Toronto. You got a lot of friends on this call, Phil, and we appreciate it. The last couple of questions I'd like to ask you is, so for a realtor or a mortgage professional interacting with Canadian consumers every single day, the question that we get, and I'd like to hear how you answer that, is now a good time to buy real estate? Or what would you tell me? What are you telling your kids to do, Phil?
Yeah. You know what, if you have to sell your home, or if you want to sell your home, I had a very good friend of mine, long-term friend, who felt she needed to sell her home. And someone, her realtor, who happened to be one in my mind, had suggested that she better get it done in the next couple of weeks because, things could get ugly and prices could plummet. And I sort of rolled my eyes and I took a deep breath and I said, listen, Sue, if you need to sell your house, now's a fine time to sell your house. There's, as I said earlier, there's more demand than there is supply in the marketplace, and prices have held on. I said, don't accept a fireside price because the long-term prospects look reasonable. And I provided her with our forecast and the science behind it. It's a crystal ball, like I said at the beginning, but there's some science behind it. And she felt better. So I don't know whether she's going to list her house or not. If you need to, now's a reasonable time. I really truly believe the industry is able to offer a safe service. I think we can transact in a safe way, but we have not been released from emergency or urgent only level transactions at this stage in any province. We're close in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, British Columbia, I was going to say Moncton, New Brunswick. So we're close in probably half the provinces, PEI. Newfoundland's pretty close to, but we're not that close in Alberta, in Ontario, Quebec. So we should remember that the number one fiscal stimulus we can throw at this market is convincing Canadians that it's safe to buy and sell homes when the restrictions are lifted. In terms of home prices, I mentioned earlier, I believe home prices are sustainable at their current levels. They're not going to go shooting up, but our forecast for the full year, if we're able to release Canadians from strict mandated stay at home and start to open businesses by the end of the second quarter, so by the end of June, is that overall aggregate home prices by December 31st will be up 1% over 20. Now that's way down than our original forecast.
Sure, yeah.
From now to the
what was the original forecast?
It was close to 4.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
a quarter of what.
But still, I mean, if we can finish this 12-month segment and we
Absolutely.
can be flat or up 1%, I would say we've done one heck of a job weathering that storm. The other thing that I'll just chime in, and one of the key drivers is extended low interest rates. And based on what's going on, I mean, we are expecting extended low interest rates, right? And in many markets, even with the increased housing prices, the cost to buy a new home, when you factor in the servicing and carrying cost, even with the increased rise of purchase price over the last decade, it's still been cheaper than ever before. So the cost of money to carry these things is incredibly low. And the other thing that you made a comment on is that probably not a good time to be a speculator right now. Because there's too much uncertainty, but it's like anything else. If you have the power of time, compound, and if you have the ability to put a good tenant in there long term, as we know for 100 years, and counting, the investment in real estate has been absolutely exceptional, not only in this country but in most countries. And
never let a good crisis go to waste.
You got it, Winston Churchill, and Rand. I couldn't agree with you more. Phil, this was an absolute pleasure. You're just a walking library of Canadian information, and it happens with by osmosis with all the time that you put in. On behalf of and I must say, we work with more realtors in Canada than any other finance company in the country, and
absolutely
we have a lot of really, really good partners with Royal Lepage, and we work with realtors of every brand. And I do want to mention that the power of working with a professional realtor and a professional mortgage broker, there's so much value to the Canadian consumer. There's so much choice. There's so much consideration, to the average consumer. And I think that over the last month, we've been able to really highlight the value of working with a really good, solid 1-2 punch. So thank you for the leadership that you continue to display in Canada. Thank you for just being an incredible, great guy. And I have some ideas. You tweaked some ideas with me today, Phil. So we're going to be
That's good.
We're going to be getting an off the air call here in the next short while. On behalf of all of us and our guests, I'll make sure I get you a recording. Thank you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. It's a great conversation. We covered so much ground, and to everybody who tuned in, all the DLC professionals across the country and the affiliated companies and realtors across the country. Thank you for doing what you're doing for Canadians. I know we're not for frontline workers, essential service workers like doctors or police, but we are midline people. We are putting ourselves at risk to help Canadians in need of housing. And I salute you. And I salute you, Gary, for doing these webinars. You're spreading a lot of good education and good word in a time when communication is so critical. So thank you for the opportunity.
Amen. And thanks very much. Be well. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon. Have a great afternoon and a great week. Bye-bye.